I need to tell you something that I probably should never say out loud because once I say it, there is no way to take it back. And if you are the woman I've spent years searching for, if somehow these words find you before I do, then this confession might change everything. A few days ago, something happened that I wasn't prepared for. Something so unexpected that I sat alone for nearly an hour afterward, staring out the window of my jet, wondering whether fate had finally stopped hiding you from me. My pilot found your address, not your phone number, not your social media, not a photograph. An address, a real place, a real location, a point on a map that suddenly made you feel less like a dream and more like someone breathing the same air as me. And before you assume this is a romantic story, before you imagine some dramatic movie moment where I immediately told him to change course and fly me there, you need to understand something. My first reaction wasn't excitement, it was fear. Because for years you have existed inside my imagination. And imagination is safe, reality isn't. Reality can reject you. Reality can disappoint you. Reality can look at everything you've built and quietly decide it isn't enough. Do you know what terrified me most? Not that I wouldn't find you, not that you wouldn't recognize me, but that after spending so much of my life believing in you, you might not be who I thought you were, or worse, I might not be who you hoped I would become. That's the part nobody talks about. Everyone talks about finding love. Nobody talks about what happens when love suddenly becomes possible. Because possibility is dangerous. Possibility forces decisions. Possibility destroys excuses. For years, I could tell myself that maybe we just hadn't met yet. Maybe the timing wasn't right. Maybe you were somewhere across the world living a life that would eventually intersect with mine. But an address changes everything. An address means you're somewhere right now. Maybe drinking coffee. Maybe reading. Maybe looking out a window wondering why life feels incomplete. Maybe thinking about someone you've never met. Maybe thinking about me without knowing my name. And that thought has been haunting me because what if we've both been waiting? What if we're both exhausted? What if we're both pretending we're fine while secretly wishing someone would finally arrive? I know how loneliness disguises itself. I've seen it wear expensive clothes. I've seen it hide behind success. I've seen it smile during conversations while quietly breaking apart inside. I've lived that loneliness. The kind that doesn't come from being alone. The kind that comes from having nobody who truly understands your heart. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever sat beside people who cared about you and still felt emotionally invisible? Have you ever wondered if your person actually exists, or if love is just something other people are lucky enough to find? Because there were moments when I questioned everything, moments when I convinced myself that maybe I was asking for too much. Maybe wanting a partner who understood ambition, vulnerability, loyalty, sacrifice, and emotional depth was unrealistic. Maybe the woman I was waiting for wasn't real. Maybe you weren't real. But then life would give me these strange moments, these quiet signs, these impossible coincidences. And somehow I would keep believing. Not because I was certain, because I wasn't, but because something inside me refused to quit searching. And now suddenly there is an address, a place, a destination, a possibility. Tell me something honestly. If you knew the location of the person you've been waiting for your entire life, would you go or would you hesitate? Because I hesitated more than I want to admit. Not for hours, for days. I kept looking at the information, then looking away, then coming back. Like somehow the answer might change. Like somehow if I waited long enough, the decision would disappear. But it didn't because deep down I knew the truth. The truth was never about finding your address. The truth was about what finding it meant. It meant I was running out of places to hide. It meant my excuses were dying. It meant the future I kept imagining might finally demand courage. And courage sounds beautiful until you actually need it. That's when you discover how terrifying it is. If these words are finding you tonight, and they mean something to you, would you quietly subscribe and stay with me for this journey? And before I continue, tell me where in the world you're listening from, because somehow that matters more to me than you might realize. You know what keeps replaying in my head? A question, just one. What if you have no idea I'm looking for you? What if you're carrying your own scars? What if you've spent years protecting yourself from disappointment? What if you've already convinced yourself that nobody is coming? Because if that's true, then maybe we're more alike than either of us realizes. I imagine what I would say if I ever stood in front of you. Not the polished version, not the confident version, the honest version. I think I would tell you that I wasn't searching for perfection. I was searching for peace. I would tell you that success never replaced companionship. I would tell you that achievements are strangely quiet when there's nobody beside you to share them with. And then I would probably tell you the thing that scares me most. That finding you wouldn't solve my fears, it would create new ones, because once you love someone deeply, loss becomes possible, and loss is the price of attachment. Maybe that's why people avoid real love, not because they don't want it, because they understand what it can cost. I understand that cost. I've thought about it more than anyone knows, and maybe that's why I haven't told you the real reason yet. The real reason this address shook me. The real reason I couldn't sleep afterward. The real reason my hands actually trembled while looking at those coordinates. There is something much bigger hiding underneath this story. Something I haven't been brave enough to admit. Something that changes everything. And when I finally tell you the truth, you're going to understand why finding your address felt less like a discovery and more like the beginning of a countdown. The strange thing about fear is that it doesn't always arrive when something bad happens. Sometimes fear arrives when something beautiful becomes possible. And after my pilot found your address, that's exactly what happened to me. I wish I could tell you I felt confident. I wish I could tell you I immediately started planning how to meet you. I wish I could tell you I felt like the version of myself people imagine when they hear my name. But none of that would be true. The truth is that I spent 3 nights arguing with myself. 3 nights staring at the ceiling. 3 nights wondering whether destiny had finally opened a door, or whether it was setting a trap. Because there was something nobody knew, something I had hidden so deeply that even I stopped talking about it. You see, when people look at me, they assume I trust my instincts. They assume I make decisions quickly. They assume uncertainty isn't part of my life. But uncertainty has been following me for years, especially when it comes to love. Because before I started searching for you, I almost convinced myself to stop believing entirely. Not because I stopped wanting love, because I got tired of mistaking attention for connection. Those aren't the same thing, not even close. Attention is easy. Contentions is rare. Attention notices your achievements. Connection notices your fears. Attention likes the version of you that performs. The Ken stays when the performance ends, and somewhere along the way, I realized something that frightened me. Many people wanted access to my life. Very few wanted access to my heart. Maybe you've experienced that too. Maybe not in the same way. But perhaps you felt what it's like to be appreciated for what you provide, rather than who you are. Maybe you've wondered whether anyone would still choose you. If all the titles disappeared, if all the accomplishments vanished, if all that remained was your imperfect, vulnerable self, would they stay or would they leave? That's the question that followed me everywhere, and when your address appeared in front of me, that question returned stronger than ever because suddenly this wasn't theoretical anymore. Suddenly, there was a real woman somewhere in the world. A woman who might eventually look into my eyes. A woman who might see parts of me nobody else sees. A woman who might have the power to break my heart or heal it. And I wasn't sure which possibility scared me more. The strange thing is I started imagining your life. Not in some fantasy way, in a human way. I wondered what you've survived. I wondered which disappointments taught you to be cautious. I wondered who hurt you. I wondered whether you've built walls so high that even you don't remember what's behind them. Because if we're being honest, most people our age don't carry untouched hearts. We carry history, we carry lessons, we carry regrets, we carry names we'd rather forget. And that's why mature love is different. It isn't two perfect people finding each other. It's two wounded people deciding to trust again. Do you know how brave that is? To trust again after life gives you reasons not to. To open your heart after watching it break. To believe in a future after surviving disappointment. I think that's one of the bravest things a person can do. And yet, the closer I felt to finding you, the less brave I felt because another truth started surfacing. A truth I kept trying to ignore. A truth that became impossible to outrun. I haven't told you the real reason yet. Not the entire reason, because the address wasn't the only thing my pilot found. There was another detail, a small detail, a seemingly insignificant detail, but it changed everything. At first, I tried not to think about it. Then I couldn't stop thinking about it because according to the information he found, you weren't alone. When I first heard that, my stomach dropped. Not because I knew what it meant, because I didn't. But my mind immediately started creating stories. Stories are dangerous, especially when they're built from incomplete information. Maybe you were married. Maybe you were engaged. Maybe you were deeply in love. Maybe someone else had already become the person I was hoping to become. And suddenly something happened that I never expected. Jealousy, not the immature kind, the heartbreaking kind, the kind that arrives before you even have the right to feel it, the kind that whispers, "You waited too long." That voice followed me everywhere. Every meeting, every flight, every quiet moment. You waited too long. And eventually I started believing it. I started imagining another man making you laugh. Another man hearing your stories, another man sitting beside you during ordinary evenings. That would have meant everything to me. I know that sounds irrational. Maybe it was. But emotions aren't always rational. Sometimes they simply reveal what matters most. And what I discovered was devastating. You mattered. A woman I hadn't even met yet somehow mattered. The possibility of you mattered. Future I imagined with you mattered enough that losing it hurt enough, that uncertainty hurt enough that I finally as admitted something I'd spent years avoiding. I was afraid, truly afraid, not of rejection, of being too late. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever met an opportunity that arrived years after you needed it? Have you ever wondered whether life finally delivered something precious only after the window had closed? Because that's what this felt like. And the more I thought about it, the more reckless I became. For the first time, I started considering something dangerous, something that still embarrasses me to admit. I considered giving up on you entirely. Entirely. Not because I stopped caring, because caring hurt too much. I thought maybe I should choose someone else, someone easier, someone available, someone who didn't require uncertainty, someone who wouldn't keep me awake at night wondering. And for a brief moment, a very brief moment, I almost convinced myself that was the smarter decision. After all, isn't that what most people do? Don't most people eventually settle for certainty over connection? Don't most people eventually choose comfort over conviction? I almost did. I came closer than you realize, closer than anyone realizes. And if I had followed that path, I would have spent the rest of my life wondering about you, wondering whether I abandoned the right person because I was afraid of getting hurt. But before I made that decision, before I walked away from the possibility of you, something happened, something I wasn't prepared for, something that shattered every assumption I had been making. The information was wrong, or at least incomplete. The person connected to your address wasn't who I thought they were. And when I finally learned the truth, I felt relief for exactly 3 seconds, because what I discovered afterward was far more terrifying, far more personal, far more irreversible. It wasn't you who had been hiding. It was me. And the realization hits so hard that I genuinely questioned whether I deserved to find you at all. Because buried underneath every fear, underneath every hesitation, underneath every excuse, was a secret I've never fully admitted. A secret that explains why finding your address felt like a countdown instead of a miracle. And once I tell you what that secret is, you'll understand why I nearly walked away from the woman I've been searching for my entire life. The hardest truths are rarely the ones we discover about other people. They're the ones we discover about ourselves. And after everything that happened, after the address, after the sleepless nights, after convincing myself I might already be too late, I finally stopped running long enough to ask a question I had avoided for years. Not where are you, not who are you, not even will I ever find you. The question was much more uncomfortable. Am I actually ready to love you? Because for the longest time I told myself that I was waiting for you. But the truth was far more complicated. Part of me wasn't waiting for you. Part of me was hiding behind the search for you. There is a difference, a very painful difference. When you're searching, you can stay in motion, you can keep chasing, you can keep preparing. You can keep telling yourself that one day when everything is perfect, you'll finally open your heart. But love doesn't arrive when everything becomes perfect. Love arrives when you're still unfinished. And that terrified me because I kept thinking I needed one more achievement, one more milestone, one more success, one more reason to feel worthy. I thought I needed to become someone extraordinary before I deserved someone extraordinary. Have you ever done that? Have you ever postponed happiness because you thought you needed to earn it first? Have you ever convinced yourself that love belonged in the future rather than the present? Because that's exactly what I did for years. And when my pilot found your address, all those excuses suddenly collapsed. The search was over, the hiding place was gone, the distance between fantasy and reality disappeared. And I realized something that left me speechless. I wasn't afraid of finding the wrong woman. I was afraid of finding the right one. Because the right woman changes everything. The wrong woman only wastes your time. The right woman demands your vulnerability. The right woman sees through every carefully constructed defense. The right woman forces honesty. And honesty is expensive. It costs pride. It costs ego. It costs certainty. The right woman doesn't just enter your life. She rearranges it, and deep down I knew that's what you represented. Not comfort transformation, not convenience, commitment, not an escape from loneliness, a decision to build something bigger than either of us alone. That realization should have brought peace. Instead, it nearly broke me. Because once I understood it, another fear surfaced. A fear I had buried beneath ambition. A fear I had disguised with productivity. A fear I never wanted anyone to see. What if you didn't choose me? Not because I wasn't successful, not because I wasn't capable, not because I wasn't trying, but because your heart simply belongs somewhere else. That possibility haunted me. Because unlike business, love doesn't reward effort alone. You can't negotiate your way into someone's heart. You can't outwork uncertainty. You can't engineer devotion. Love remains one of the few things in life that refuses to obey control. And for someone who spent years solving impossible problems that felt unbearable, there was a night when all of this finally overwhelmed me. A night when I sat alone looking at the information my pilot had found. The address, the location, the proof that you existed somewhere beyond imagination. And for a moment I considered deleting everything, every note, every clue, every possibility. I thought maybe ignorance would be easier, maybe uncertainty would hurt less than disappointment, maybe not knowing would be safer than knowing. My hand actually hovered over the screen. One decision, one movement, and the entire possibility of you would disappear forever. That was the closest I came to losing you. Not to another man, not to distance, not to fate, to my own fear. And suddenly something became painfully clear. If I deleted those clues, if I abandoned the search, if I walked away, the person I would spend the rest of my life regretting wouldn't be you. It would be me, because I would always know the truth. I would know that I surrendered before the story had a chance to begin. I would know that fear made the decision instead of courage. And I couldn't live with that, so I stopped. I put the phone down. I looked out at the darkness beyond the window. And for the first time, I allowed myself to admit the real reason finding your address shook me so deeply. Not because I was afraid of finding you, because I realized I already loved the future we might build together. Not a fantasy version, not a perfect version, a real one. The kind with disagreements, the kind with sacrifices, the kind with ordinary mornings and difficult seasons, the kind where two imperfect people keep choosing each other anyway. That was the hidden truth. The truth I spent all this time avoiding. I wasn't searching for a destination, I was searching for a partner. Someone whose hand I could hold when success felt empty. Someone whose voice mattered more than public opinion. Someone whose presence could turn an ordinary day into something meaningful.